Okay, looks like we're live. It's 6:32, so I'm calling this meeting to order. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Scarborough Ad Hoc Downtown Development Committee. Let's take a quick moment to swing through the list. There's our final member. For the sake of expedience, I'll call your name and then say hello. Kim, you just hopped on, but you're first on the list. Kim Bridgham.
Hello.
Art.
Hello.
Art Dillon. Sarah Layton.
Hi.
Tom Madden.
Hi, everybody.
Basha Mohammed.
Hi, everyone.
Kim Rand.
Good evening.
Brian Shumway.
Hello.
Bruce Zivik.
Good evening.
Rocky Risbera.
Good evening.
Dan Bacon.
Good evening.
Tom Halls, our town manager. He vanished, but I know he's with us.
Sure.
Great. So our third item, I suppose, for this evening is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion on the minutes from our previous meeting? Art? Looks like move passage. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Kim Rand. Is there any discussion on the minutes from our last meeting? Seeing none. All in favor, please gesture at your screen or say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? It's unanimous. Minutes are passed. Okay, so the bulk of tonight's agenda is item 4, discussion points. And the first item on that list is potential subcommittees. So just a quick refresher from 2 weeks ago, we talked about how there's a sort of large breadth of subject matter and information that we want to start collecting quickly. We have friends of the committee who may want to contribute, and we want to figure out the best ways to collect information from Scarborough residents. And so we thought it might make sense to form some early subcommittees to talk about the best means to channel all that energy and get the committee up to speed on all these subjects quickly. So maybe what we'll do is I'll just start asking for suggestions, and we'll try and put together a list of subcommittees that make sense. We'll vote to approve the list, and then we can start to assign members based on interest, if that makes sense to everybody. Who wants to go first? I know we had some good ideas 2 weeks ago. Sarah, I remember, this might be a good place to start, that you had talked about how important it is that we have a good, strong method of collecting feedback from Scarborough residents. Do you want to talk any more on that? Is that a pretty good summary of what we need? Or I think we probably want to figure out exactly what the charge to these committees is going to be.
Yeah, maybe just we expand that and kind of have an umbrella of like communication and or community outreach. Maybe that covers like outgoing communication and also any feedback we'd want to gather.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty standard subcommittee, John and John, right? Okay.
And I guess one thing I wonder, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other, what I had tossed out briefly on this subject matter 2 weeks ago was the interest from people outside of Scarborough who may have some kind of valuable feedback to give the committee, whether it's chambers of commerce or leadership in other downtown committees who have been doing the same work. Does it make sense to do both of those things as part of the broader community outreach committee? Does that make sense to everybody, or are those two different missions? That seems like one. I'm seeing a lot of nods.
I think
Anybody
so.
think that seems like two different committees? I think it makes sense to put those together. Sorry, John Anderson.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it could be like a community and stakeholder outreach group that could reach out to not only residents, but also businesses, certain associations or things like that you just mentioned, Travis.
Great. Yeah. So that makes sense, I think, as one. If nobody wants to argue the point, or is there anything else that we think might fit nicely under that umbrella? John?
One comment that I had, and I think it probably fits under there, but it might be looking at the different committees that we have as a town. You know, the one I was thinking specifically was the Senior Advisory Committee. Just to make sure that we leverage that group with thinking some things and also bring that senior perspective to the table. That just might be a good way to look at some of the existing town committees and see how you guys might want to leverage them and reach out to them as part of the engagement.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense. I think that still fits nicely under that stakeholder umbrella. So that sounds like a pretty good, thorough, busy subcommittee. Let's move on to any other subcommittees that people may have mulling around. John,
Well, if we're talking about committees that are within the town, something that I mentioned last week was about sustainability and in the design. It was something that was mentioned in the scope of work that was given to us. There is a committee within town. I have a little bit of a background in that. I sent some information to Rocky as to for him to look over, and I'd like to get a feel from the developers how much they are interested in getting involved with that. But anyhow, and also looking at that information that Tom had sent us about feedback from other citizens in those papers. I can't remember what they were, but over the last couple of years, sustainability wasn't one of the largest things, but it was mentioned a few times as something that people would like to see developed within Scarborough and or town center. So if you think that sustainability is a committee, I think I could be helpful in that.
thoughts about a sustainability focused committee? Seeing some nods. Brian says thumbs up. Great. Is there anything else that belongs with that category, or does that feel like a pretty cut and dry subject? Okay. And actually, John, I know you had your hand up. Did you?
Yeah, I was just gonna throw out a recommendation because, you know, I was doing some of my own research knowing this was a topic. And then after I looked back at Dan's slides that he presented, a lot of the things that I was coming to naturally, I think, Dan, your last slide that kind of had areas of focus, I thought that was a good starting point. So Travis, that might be something to just pull up and use that maybe as a way to kind of discuss committees, because I thought, again, Dan, what you kind of proposed really kind of naturally led to like what I was kind of thinking on my own. So that just might be something you guys want to consider.
Does it, Tom, do you, or I don't know if Liam's online, have the ability to put on the screen the shot that John's talking about from Dan's presentation?
Yeah, is Dan here?
Dan, you might know it off the top of your
You have
head.
it handy?
I have a feeling you've said it more than
I can grab
once.
the presentation and bring it up. It might take me just 1 sec. So
Yeah.
talking about, John, from last meeting, sort of the key elements of a downtown.
It was the slide that had I wrote it down.
It was the collaboration slide, like
Yeah.
thoughts and ideas on how, yeah. It might have been the very last slide, Dan.
Everybody see that?
Great.
I think this is the one you're referring to, John.
Yep.
Yeah, Travis,
Go ahead, Brian.
from this, 2 ideas pop out for me. One is a subcommittee on the grandstand, which I know Robbie mentioned as a real time sensitive topic to tackle. and I remember hearing some consensus around that. The other, which I think might tackle or envelop some of these, would be a subcommittee kind of charged with finding other models of similar developments to bring back to the committee to almost serve as some virtual field trips for us.
Yeah, I think the idea of a subcommittee that gets to work early, developing a curriculum for the committee on best practices, what's been done in other places that have similar opportunities to ours, whether there are any consultants or experts who may have something useful to share. I think that's information that we all want. And so it might make sense for a subcommittee to come together to sort of design how to deliver all that information to the rest of us. We called it like models / education.
And that seems like it could kind of hit maybe the first 3 bullets of this slide that we're looking at now.
Mhm. I think it's a good idea, Brian. And I'm going to call on you again, Sarah. We had talked about a school subcommittee, is that right?
Yeah, I think we would just need to think what we would want from that. I mean, I can also just give you guys an update. Maybe we can, carve out an agenda item in an upcoming meeting, and I can kind of give you an overview of where we are in the process and what's next. That might satisfy.
Maybe it's something that we can create down the road if it turns out we think we need it. Okay.
Travis, is there a more general, maybe subcommittee, or maybe there's not a lot of work to do, but that kind of deals with the civic presence within the downtown, or civic and institutional presence? And schools would be one example of a civic presence, but
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know what else would be, but other municipal uses. You think of a traditional downtown as sort of being the hub of these types of things.
Tom, what do you think about that? How much are we, and this might be premature to ask, but how much of the Scarborough municipal function is going to hopefully be wound into this? Is it a big opportunity, or I think that might actually be on our agenda for later?
I think potentially, and it may come up in the grandstand discussion, that could house a number of civic uses, some of our current facility needs, frankly. No, I think it's an excellent point. Back to kind of the charge to the committee, it's really about identifying those key amenities that we think are important to make this a vibrant place. And it strikes me that some civic components have to be some of those amenities. There's other things too, of course, but I don't know if it's worthy of a full subcommittee, but it's an important feature for sure. I think it's going to be the glue that holds this thing together. I would note, just looking at the charge, there's a financial forecasting responsibility. Now that's probably down the road once we identify some of these things, but it may make sense to create the subcommittee and kind of have a placeholder so they're ready to move forward when that time comes.
It makes sense. We know we're going to need it. So I have 6 so far. Does anybody else, Dan or Rocky, any other committee members have thoughts about what we should be splitting ourselves up into to research early?
What about the marketing, recruitment, and advocacy one? Is that part of our charge? Or is it that we would come up with sort of a plan on how to present to others or something like that? And does it tie in with the rest of the Downs marketing and stuff that's going on now?
Yeah, I put that in there. So didn't have a real targeted sort of approach for a subcommittee. It was more of a, how can the committee through this process or after advocate for implementation of a downtown plan, help draw maybe some of these or advocate for some of these civic buildings or other kind of key users to be interested in the downtown. So that was generally the idea. Not sure if it needs a subcommittee or not, but to your point, I think having some early important destinations within downtown is really important. Like I think the last time we talked about Mashpee Commons, which could be example, one of those many examples, put a post office in early to create foot traffic and to create a hub. So given the trajectory of post, then that was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So I'm not suggesting post office is necessarily the modern solution, but something along those lines.
Excuse me. One thing I thought of is, the article that Brian sent that Tom put on the Google, I thought was really interesting. And it feels like there's an opportunity to really research what downtowns have worked and which ones haven't, to help frame what would work for us. And so I think that article is a great start. I don't know where to go from there, but it definitely seems like there would be some lessons learned from other communities who have embarked on this and have been successful and have failed.
Yeah, I think that fits very nicely in the sort of other models / education committee, which, the purpose would be to teach all of us. Unless Kim, you're coming at that from an angle that I'm from a different angle.
No, my angle was just benchmarking, I guess.
Great.
Just Travis, one other, you asked for our input on anything else. And this can come out of, additional committee work, but I wouldn't underestimate parking and the dynamics of parking being a really key consideration with successful downtowns. And so I'll kind of leave it at that. I think parking, sharing, parking garages, not having parking dominate design.
And is that Dan, do you think that that's a conversation all to itself, or is there sort of a general infrastructure conversation that we ought to be having that includes parking, whether it's, do we agree that there should be a structure, height limits on buildings, some of the things that your presentation suggested you have a sense of where you're going, but not a perfect vision. Is that something that you think would be useful to expand into some other infrastructure subjects, or is parking such a? Do we think that a subcommittee is going to pull their hair out just talking parking?
I think it's part of a larger conversation. I just think it's not just the infrastructure. It's not just the design. It also has relationship to ordinances. It overlaps a number of kind of pushes and pulls, but and it also could be a, public-private partnership opportunity. Like successful downtowns often have municipal parking garages that there's some kind of cost sharing, for example, like Freeport's so going back to kind of models, it could be models on specific elements of what you guys look at. So I just raise it as something that we all need to pay attention to, because if you just follow the ordinances, we'll have a lot of parking and we'll have, we won't have the floor area that you want on a downtown.
I wonder to scope it maybe a little bit bigger is kind of about parking and transportation overall. So we'll want parking for people who want to drive in, but what about buses or bicycles or bicycle paths, things like that? So I'm wondering, Dan, would that be from your experience, would that be like a good scope to think about, like, one, how people get there and all the elements associated with it?
Absolutely, yeah. Ways to minimize the need for parking, such as the things you raised, is, yeah. So excellent point.
That's great, John. Thank you. And Dana, Rocky, anything else? Tom, anything else that you are hoping that we get to work on early?
I've got one, Travis, if I can jump in.
Sure.
I think a topic that we brought up a number of times, especially while we were doing the site visit, was how we tie in sort of the current downtown that exists up on Oak Hill, and how we sort of create a fluid structure between the two, whether that's through other transport that parking subcommittee could potentially take on, or through other ideas. It's a topic that's been touched on a number of times. It's probably one worth discussing.
And that was actually in the charge, I believe. It's a very good point, Tom.
So what could that be? Connectivity? Not just to the downtown, but to land trust property. I mean, there's a number of connectivity opportunities, I think, that should be explored.
Yeah.
You know, does a committee like that end up potentially exploring the question of, you know, whether this is a downtown with a big D or a little d? Or is this cast in stone that this is going to be the absolute downtown of Scarborough?
No, in fact, the town council has approved a downtown plan that suggests that this is going to be part of, our existing footprint here in Oak Hill. So I think that decision's been made largely. It can be informed and shaped undoubtedly.
So I think it does make this conversation all the more important then. That remains front and center in the work that we're doing.
So maybe it's the downtown district committee. So the document they would start with is the downtown plan that talks about the existing infrastructure and footprint, and then this opportunity. And I think there's certainly more work that could be done to connect the two.
Yeah, it strikes me that if you've got a committee dealing with that, you can start thinking about, how does this space contribute to a downtown, rather than what does this place have in it because it is going to be the downtown. And I don't know if you can pick up on the distinction, but it's the distinction is this is part of a larger overall downtown area, rather than being a concentrated one spot that is dubbed the downtown.
All good
I know which
stuff.
committee Brian's volunteering for.
Travis, I'm a little concerned that you're up into just about as many committees as you have members.
Yeah. Yep. So what I wonder is, if I run through the list of what I have now, maybe there could be an opportunity to combine some of these. Maybe some of these could be held until we get closer to needing them, or maybe we have to do them all. But what I have so far is a committee focused on community outreach and stakeholders. A committee focused on sustainability. A committee that focuses on the grandstand and options and opportunities there. A committee that identifies models that have worked or haven't worked and develops sort of a curriculum, which I imagine that committee will meet a couple of times and then dissolve. I think the purpose is to come up with a list of useful materials and deliver that material back to the bigger committee. A financial forecasting committee, a committee on transportation and parking, and a downtown district committee that focuses on that connective tissue with the rest of greater downtown Scarborough. So what do we think? Who wants to weigh in on need or combining, or how this list sounds to the committee so far?
Do you
Sarah?
think, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
I was just wondering if we could combine the parking and transportation up into the downtown district committee so that we look at it somewhat holistically.
I think that makes sense.
I was just gonna say, I know the goal is to consolidate, but it strikes me that we might be missing a big one around programming. And maybe that comes later after the sort of design or model and education. Maybe that group then transforms into the programming, but I think that's a big component of what we're supposed to be delivering.
So what do you mean by programming, Sarah?
Like, what Tom said, like, is there going to be civic buildings? Is there going to be, what type of businesses do we want to have?
Okay.
Things like that.
Mhm.
I believe that was part of the charge, but Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, it certainly is. I wonder if that's not the full committee's work. Once these subcommittees go off, you kind of come back together. Travis, I'm anticipating that you have a standing agenda item as committee reports.
Mhm.
And they may be very quick. Sometimes it may be very in-depth, but you really take away, get those good nuggets of takeaways from each of the subcommittees. And then I think what you're talking about is really the wrap up and the full committee's work with
Yep.
that input in hand.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I think what'll be useful for the full committee with every meeting is that we all have, repeatedly reviewed our charge. So when we're getting reports back from, for instance, the Community Outreach and Stakeholder Committee, the Grandstand Committee, all of these committees that are going to sort of feed that knowledge of what the programming looks like. We're always kind of being informed on those charge items rather than break out the charge items into individual subcommittees. They should be our focus with all the work that we do.
That makes sense.
Travis, Basha has a contribution.
Sure, Basha.
I was thinking, because we have so many line items, so why don't my thought process, why don't we actually prioritize the top 3, and then we work on all the subcommittees, work on those top 3. Once that work is done or somewhere else, then again we go back to the remaining items. If we are trying to tackle on all the items at the same time, probably we might not be getting the productivity out of everybody else what we are trying to do. So I counted there are almost like 6 or 7 subcommittees that we are talking about. So based on our roadmap, let's choose the top 3 items which are high priority, which can actually contribute to the downward subcommittees, which can help them to see more productivity out of it. So that's my thought process. When I'm getting a big task, that's how I try to work through the details.
I think that there's certainly a sense of ranking both importance, but also what has to happen first. And so that might be a good exercise to do, is figure out which of these subcommittees should start meeting this week or next.
Yeah.
And then some of the others, financial forecasting and some of these others may be held for assignment for a later date. That makes sense. Brian?
Travis, it strikes me, and I'm looking back at the charge and thinking about our subcommittees, that there's a risk of role creep for us. Being a developer is a lot of fun, and it's fun to choose materials, and it's fun to choose what retailer goes here and there, and I'm wondering if that fun stuff is a little bit more than we ought to be doing as a governing and representative body, and if there's kind of a zooming out a little bit, where if it's really kind of our role to clearly articulate the type of thing that we want, and then look to the developer to be able to deliver it in whatever private market way works to meet a clearly articulated set of goals, rather than saying, we want a Burger King here and we want a Whole Foods here, and to be a little bit more performance spec about what we want. So as I'm kind of thinking through some of these things, I'm finding even myself tempted to get into the real nitty gritty of, let's get blue picnic tables and 8-foot umbrellas, and that's feeling a little bit inappropriate, as a committee member, and tempting. And I'm curious about feedback from others, and particularly from the town councilors and Tom, in terms of the intent of all of this.
Typically, from a design approach in a typical project, programming is often what's classified as the problem-seeking aspect of any sort of design. And some of that has been done to a certain extent with those meetings that Tom and I guess city councils had, where they try to extract from the public what would they like to see. I think it was broader in that particular instance for all of Scarborough. And then it focused a little bit on the town center. But I think that what we're trying to do is figure out aspects of what we'd like to see. In other words, pulling the spaghetti together to start throwing it on the wall before we start synthesizing it, and then picking things in, picking things out. Let me just make an example. Here. For instance, one of the things that I got out of reading that information was that the people that participated in these little charrettes were interested in the rural aspect, the farming aspect of Scarborough. Okay, so how does that translate? Well, for me, I would say, well, maybe one of the things that we would be interested in a downtown is the idea of a farmer's market, for instance. And I'm not talking about, just setting 10-foot white tents up in a parking lot. I mean, they typically, farmers markets have been a little bit more successful in other areas where there are consultants in this particular area that will actually help you develop a farmer's market type of thing. And it's not a full-time thing, but that you develop a facility that encompasses many other aspects of what people are interested in doing within the community. I mean, it might also support musical events, community activities of, whatever that would all happen. And then these things, as Brian was talking about, are not specifics. It's more of a performance type of address, where we have, yes, we need shopping, yeah, but no, we don't need Whole Foods and a whole litany of other ones. We have a shopping district for food, we have a shopping district for retail and community activities, and we sort of talk about them in broad general senses. So to get back to where I started with this, is that I think that right now we need to get, start to get the spaghetti together, and then we start synthesizing it a little bit about what works and what doesn't work. And we use what we were talking about earlier in this other committee, models that worked for other, models that might have worked in DC might not work up in Maine, only because of the demographics and the socioeconomic climate wants to support different things. Plus there's more of an interest in more rural activities and that sort of thing. So again, I think programming is something that we probably need to start focusing on pretty soon here. I mean, in essence, starting to get the spaghetti together and then start throwing it.
So I would just add, Brian, I think Bruce kind of said it, but to your point, I think trying to keep this more around giving, Rocky and team some direction without being too specific, which I think is going to be kind of more than a science, because it, like you said, it is exciting to think about certain specific things we want. But I think kind of hopefully why Rocky and Dan are here too, is to kind of help course correct us a little bit, maybe when we're getting way too specific, where, you know, we need to kind of maybe pull back a little bit and think more from that performance perspective. So like, you know, kind of what Bruce, you were saying when it comes to like, we would like a place that could, you know, help have a farmer's market, and maybe part of that ability is something about, you know, either having that open space that we need or want where that farmer's market could be, or again, the sidewalks and the way the sidewalks are potentially set up to be large enough to be lined with shopping where we could close the street. So again, without like being too specific and saying we want, you know, I think like Brian was saying, 8 foot this, 6 foot that, like giving them principles or performance things that I think will really kind of give them some direction, and then allow them to kind of figure out, okay, you know, how do we make all of these good things that we would like to see actually come to life.
I just want to advocate for orange tables, if I could, to the blue. But your point's well taken. It's all too tempting. I really envision there being kind of equal amounts, maybe not equal, but some level of very specifics, perhaps around you know, civic amenities and such, or spaces that can accommodate a number of different uses on a seasonal basis, kind of what John was saying, but very, and then mixed in with that, a more general conversation around what are the other ingredients that we think are essential, without getting into the level of detail of, you know, name or brand specific, certainly. Entertainment and dining and retail, without, you know, going further than that.
I think as part of the deliverables that we were asked, this committee was asked to present to town council was a schematic design. And schematic designs don't get that. They're just one step above a bubble and sort of a hard-lined identifier, and don't get into any specifics. And that's really all we're charged with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, just to get back to the question on the agenda, what I think we're trying to do right now, and it's clear that we have about 6 months of work, and none of us are entirely sure yet how that's going to play out and what our final product is going to look like. But what we're trying to figure out right now is whether there are any specific subcommittees that need to be developed in order to dive in on some categories of work that is probably going to have to be done at a level that won't be done by the whole committee. And I think that probably as we go, the work that's done in the subcommittees that we form is going to inform the direction that we all go together over the next few months, which is still kind of an open question. So let's see if we can really nail down what we think has to be done quickly, and maybe separate, with the entire focus being on just these categories for these subcommittees, and get them assigned. And then we can go back to the other items on our discussion that I think will continue to kind of help us answer these questions, which is to hear from the town about what needs they might have, to hear from if Karen's able to join us from SEDCO about business opportunities that might be bubbling up, and what else is happening. But in the short term, and I think this is really to Basha's point, what do we need to get small groups working on right away? And the answer might be just 1 or 2 things, or it might be 7 things, but let's try and figure that out for now. What do we need to get some small group work on right away? Tom?
I think community engagement, sort of sooner the better. I think that's going to drive a few things if we do want to get the community's input, especially on the grandstand.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a pressing topic, and if we do want any input, we should probably get that going as quickly as we can, so that we can start making some of those decisions if we want the community's input on that before we come to a conclusion ourselves.
Yeah, so on the topic actually, there were already some committees which I did the work, right? Like there is a community center committee, they did some work, and then there is already some work has been done, and then they have actually provided some feedback to the town. So is there a way for us to get that feedback that is coming from the community that we can also utilize and then see where we are going with it?
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense, that we should have some focus on how to get the community engaged right away. What else? So we have, just to swing through again, sustainability, grandstand / civic needs, useful models, financial forecasting, parking and transportation, downtown district committee. What do we think needs to be sort of sent off to get work done right now?
I'd put grandstand up there pretty early, Trav.
Grandstand.
Yeah.
See a lot of nodding.
I see Kim Rand has her hand up if you'd like.
I think that what could help drive some of this is, and I agree with the grandstand committee, but also, what information can help us think about some of this other stuff, like where can we go read about more articles like what Brian supplied in Mashpee Commons, and anything that we can get that will help inform us, because I think that almost, I wouldn't say it would be a one and done committee, but it could be fairly short-lived, to your point earlier, Travis.
Right, yeah, the sort of models and committee education committee. Right, I mean, it would be great if that group could meet in the next couple of weeks and have something for us by our next meeting.
The other one that it might make sense to get up and running is the downtown committee, and that maybe it happens in stages. So initially they could familiarize themselves with the plan and kind of report out that to the full group, so you don't have to all immerse yourselves in that. And then there could be, they could go dark for a while and then pick back up when tasks come forward that are kind of worthy and fit within the wheelhouse.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have 4. Does anybody else think that there are specific committees that need to start work right away?
Incidentally, I just want to throw into, Kim reminded me, my hope and intent with creating that shared Google Drive, you all have access to it. You can add to it. And the hope is that as we find things in our own searching, put it up there as resource material. And all of you are encouraged to certainly go and, poke around. Let's share what we found. I guess I would encourage you, if there's something in particular you really want to make people aware of, do it through the committee process, but that's there for your use, and please use it.
Travis, can you list again the 4 that you?
Yeah, so right now we're talking about the Community Outreach and Stakeholder Committee, the Grandstand Committee, the Successful Models and Education Committee, and the Downtown District Committee. And those last 2 are likely to maybe meet early often and then maybe not at all again after they've kind of done their initial work.
It feels like those 4 would really inform the next group of committees. So like transportation, well, you don't really know what you need until you have a feel for what you're going to put there.
Yep.
And even the sustainability, which I think is one that probably a lot of us can have passion about, especially being ocean folks. But until you know what you're going to put there, you don't necessarily know what you need to do to make it sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's useful that we've done this list building now, because we can keep revisiting this conversation as we gain more knowledge. Does anybody want to make a case for one of those coming off, or anything else going on? And then maybe we can have a motion to establish those 4 committees tonight.
It's worth noting, Travis, there more than likely there'll be things that come up that we're not even thinking of tonight. So this should be a dynamic, fluid process. You might, if there's support for these 4, maybe you create those 4. We'll have the minutes reflect these thoughts for the other ones, or we could do them all at once. But I guess my point is, I suspect there'll be some flexibility going forward.
Right. Yeah, this is, what do we need to create now so these committees can start meeting? So I'll make a motion that we establish the Community Outreach Committee, the Grandstand Committee, the Modeling Committee, and the Downtown District Committee. Beginning tonight, give those committees an opportunity to gain membership and start meeting on their own.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Now, do we want to have people volunteer for those committees now? We probably do, right? So everybody can leave tonight knowing what their short-term homework is. So that's 4 committees, and those committees will be responsible for choosing their own scheduling and leadership and so on. But just bear in mind that's 4 committees that are probably going to meet in the next week or two before we all decide what we want to join. What's the best process for this? Do the town council have a recommendation, or Tom, on how to
Well, I'm just sensitive to, the public process and the transparency of your process. I think for convenience of these committees meeting when it makes sense to them, there ought to be a good degree of flexibility so they can kind of do it nimbly. I'm not sure if we can accomplish having them all as public meetings. There'll be separate Zoom meetings and so on and so forth. I think that might be overcome with good, thorough committee report outs. I mean, this is just information gathering. There's no certainly votes taken. There's no, John and Sarah, do you have an opinion about how best to handle subcommittee work?
Am I mistaken? If you keep the committees relatively small, like to 3 members, you're not reaching a quorum. I think they'd be free to interact as they see fit. And I don't think we have a Zoom ID for everybody, but maybe some training on Google Meets or something that the subcommittees could use to communicate with each other might be helpful.
Sure.
I agree. I think 3 feels like a sensible size.
It's 3 members for each subcommittee.
Tom, I know the town charter committee met, and they were thinking of committees. What did they ultimately decide in terms of?
All of those will be scheduled public meetings, published agendas and public meetings. But
was
to
there
be
a reason
fair,
sorry, go ahead.
To be fair, I mean, the subject matter they're dealing with, I think, is a bit more weighty. No offense to this group, but I think the task, and again, they're not making final decisions, but they're going to be coming forward with recommendations to the full charter committee for consideration. But they made the decision to schedule all those as public meetings. The difference is there's only 3 of them. This is a bit more challenging to manage.
When we did the what was it, the community center, the subcommittees met sort of offline. So I think there's a precedent for that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's important to note that 3 out of 4 of these committees are really just planning how the bigger committee is going to move ahead on some of these subjects. So you're right. I mean, the substance isn't all that dense. So if we're going to ask for 3 members per subcommittee, should we just start asking for volunteers? Does that make sense? We'll start with the community outreach committee. Let's just start showing hands for who's interested in joining that committee. I'm happy to join that one since I'm partially responsible for it. I see Sarah and Art.
Yeah, I feel responsible too. So there you go.
Okay, great. Next, the grandstand committee, which could also include conversations about civic or municipal needs at that site. See Kim Rand. See Art again.
I mean, I'll volunteer again if there's not a third, but I think
Brian,
everyone would jump at
ask you
that.
to volunteer since this one was your idea.
Oh, yeah, happy to.
Okay.
As long as I can be on more than one committee, Travis.
Art's already got 2, so I think it's fair. So the committee on modeling and curriculum for our education. See Brian, Bruce, and Tom, and Kim. Let's let 4. That one, all 4 of you look pretty excited about that one. So Brian, Bruce, Tom, and Kim. That's Kim Bridgham. And then the downtown district committee. See Tom? Kim Bridgham, and Basha. Did everybody get one? Did everybody get what they want? Does anybody want to join one of these after we had 3 people jump on? I think if we expand it to 4, it's not going to cause any crises. Okay, here we go. So
Travis, can I just ask a question? Sorry, before we move on. Sorry. John and John, do you guys anticipate participating in the subcommittees at all, or just the regular meetings? I think your feedback from town council might be valuable in the communication one.
So if, I'd be happy to participate wherever needed. So it
Okay.
could be on a, if you want my input on something, I'd be happy to join the meeting or the conversation. You thinking one of us should be a regular on the communication and outreach?
Might be valuable.
I
Okay.
can do that, John, since I'm on the communications committee for the council. It makes sense that I can kind of stuff back to that group too.
That
Cool.
works for me.
Thank you. Sorry, Travis.
nope, by all means. And same, of course, invitation goes to Rocky and Dan if any of these have interest to you guys. Or John and John, by all means.
Dan, I would like your input on some of the modeling. I know you've brought up a number of municipalities already that have sort of allowed you to start your line of thinking to get the Downs area to where it is now. So if you wouldn't mind hopping in, I think we probably want your input on a few of those meetings once we get going.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And we have some resources in our own work on the project on that, Tom, as well as some resources on past work on the grandstand. Maybe Rocky helps with that. I help with the models.
Great.
I just volunteered you, Rocky.
I was going to ask anyway, Dan.
Great. So I have the Community Outreach Committee is Travis, Sarah, Art, and John Anderson. Grandstand Committee is Brian, Kim, Art, and Rocky. The Education Committee, and that's Kim Rand. Education Committee is Brian, Bruce, Tom, and Kim. Kim Bridgham, and Dan Bacon's going to join them. And then the Downtown District Committee is Tom, Kim, and Basha. Kim Bridgham again. Does that sound right to everybody? Okay.
Yeah, and as the subcommittees organize themselves, I'm certainly pleased to pop in and out and provide materials to help support your work. So pull me in as you think you need to.
Great. Thank you, Tom. All right, Tom, you're up. So the next item is a presentation from the town on needs that we are aware of, either municipality or otherwise.
A presentation is a pretty strong term.
Whatever you feel is right, Tom.
Sorry, I'm having slight difficulties. Bear with me. All right. So let me see if I can share screen. So very quickly, this is a resource I do have in the Google Drive. You can look at it in more detail. I don't think it's of necessary value. I did not prepare a presentation, but this is a fairly simple, quick read. Essentially in 2016, we did prepare this municipal facilities plan. It does not include school facilities. I will note that at the outset. And what we did is we categorized our facility needs in kind of 3 pieces: short-term, medium-term, and long-term needs. The short-term window essentially was 1 to 5 years. Medium was 5 to 15, and long, I think it was 10 to 25. So there's a little overlap there. It says draft, but I assure you this was the adopted version by council. I think I can go here and we can make fairly short order. The good news is many of the projects that fall in the short term, this 1 to 5 years, have advanced or are in process. So our number 1 priority at the time was building a new public safety building, which we've accomplished. Public library expansion is something that continues to be studied. And I think John Anderson can comment further, but I think again, reevaluating some of the basic assumptions there, but that's still very much a conversation going on. We've accomplished the fueling station. There are always ongoing needs for kind of reconfiguration of our space here at Town Hall. That's not dire, but that's been partially addressed, not fully addressed. This IT expansion is kind of much of the same. They're housed here at Town Hall and are running out of space, so that's a challenge for us going further. And then at the time this was developed, there was an ongoing public-private partnership discussion about building an ice rink that is kind of fallen away at this point. Those needs may well be addressed by some of the projects the Downs team has been talking about right along. Moving into the medium term, the track and turf replacement is an item that went to the voters. Unfortunately, did not get support. I've reached out to my school colleagues in the last couple of weeks. I expect one way or another this project needs to come back. The darndest thing about capital needs is they don't get better on their own. They only get more expensive. So we definitely need to do something here, and I think this is likely to become a school led initiative with full town support. At least I'll speak for myself there. We'll see how that comes forward, but I expect you'll see it again. Community services, there's a storage building right here by the outdoor ice rink that is kind of on our long-term view, in need of some attention, but again, nothing immediate. And then we have a bunch of other SEDCO offices. We're paying rent, if you will, on their behalf for lease space as their way to accommodate them within the town facility. Again, not a dire need, but something that we thought worth putting on this list just for future discussion. And then you'll see as we move into the next phases, we do have a bunch, many, 5 or 6 at this point, fire stations located around the community. All of those are in need of attention and upgrade as they age. You'll note the community center is here in medium. That has received some recent discussion, and I think will continue to. And nothing's been advanced, but we've certainly advanced the thinking a great deal in that regard. Another fire station North Scarborough. And then longer term, there's some ball field and park needs. As our community grows, we anticipate the need, and demand on our existing facilities will just outpace their ability to perform. And that's kind of it. So this was our first attempt. It probably, given its date, needs to be touched up on, but I'm pleased we're able to advance some of the high price issues, namely the public safety building, and really advance the community center discussion quite far along, such that that process has really forced us to understand the amenities and elements of such a facility, and really searching for the best model to make that happen. Again, this document is available for all of you to take some time looking at. The rest of the document goes into more of a narrative aspect of each of those projects, and I won't bore you with that this evening. So that's the extent of my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have questions for Tom?
I don't have a question, but more of a comment that the facilities plan doesn't really kind of cover, but the need, I think, for meeting space is something that comes up often in the town. And again, I think we're starting to develop more and more pockets of it, but I think that's something that I've heard often and I have experienced myself trying to be involved with different groups, is like, where can we find a space that we can use to meet, for 5 to 10 people, that's relatively low cost or free. And so I think that's just something to consider. I know we just purchased the Alger Hall, which might have some use there, and we have some space in the public safety building, but needing to figure that. Yeah, there you go. It's right there.
Yeah, we just captured the thought, and you're right. We've been picking away at it, but we don't have a comprehensive way of doing it. I think a community center would go a long way to meeting that need in a big way, frankly.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Karen, I don't see, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Kim Rand has her hand up.
I just wanted to ask a quick question, and I don't want it to be a long drawn out discussion, but what Tom just presented was the municipal side. But Sarah, is there like a really short summary you could give from a school's perspective as well? Or is it a bigger discussion?
I suspect it might be a bigger discussion.
Okay, all right.
But I'm very happy to prepare something if people would find that of interest for an upcoming meeting.
I think that's definitely a agenda item for a meeting very soon.
Okay.
So the other half of this, we're going to ask Karen from SEDCO to come and talk about the private side. I don't see her. I guess technically our item is invite Karen Martin. So is our job tonight to vote to invite Karen Martin?
No.
So moved.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was supposed to invite her, so I beg your pardon.
I guess it could have been me too, Tom. So maybe we'll see if we can get Karen for the next meeting.
I wonder, Travis, I want to use your time, the committee's time wisely, and Karen is a wealth of knowledge, as you know. You sit on the SEDCO board. I wonder if she could be more helpful when our thinking is more refined in terms of, subject areas of interest that we think might work, whether it's entertainment or retail or lodging or dining. I think her knowledge is vast. I just wonder if we're premature to bring her in.
Okay. Art?
One of the things I was kind of suggesting for Karen too was to bring her wealth of knowledge about the Party Palooza information gathering about the downtown section that the general public had. I was wondering if anything might be brought from that as well.
I did provide those materials, Art, on that Google Drive.
Okay.
And I encourage you to look at them. They're in kind of narrative format, so it takes some time to read through them, but I think it's a good read. So I tried to pull together all of the input we've received through the comprehensive plan process that's pertinent to this discussion. And there's probably some other material there too, but I encourage you to take a look at that first, and I think she would be a great guest to maybe synthesize that, but it's there for your review.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just move on to general discussion. Does anybody have any discussion that does not fit into what we've talked about or setting our next agenda? What's on everybody's mind? Bruce, you're muted. You're muted, Bruce.
Getting used to that. Typically on any sort of given project like this, you normally have a schedule. And at least highlighting some of the milestone events. Somebody had indicated we got 6 months of time left. We really only have 4. We've got February, March, April, and the end of May. This is due June 1st, so we have 4 months. Now, within that, we've got some milestone events such as community input, which means we have to, I guess, get everybody gathered up, gather all their information, put it together in a presentation, which is an amount of time, and then a community review. And I think that these are all things that are indicated in our sort of the scope of what we're trying to do. Also, we've got costs that need to be included. Now, I'm not sure that I understood that costs were not part of this committee's responsibility, but at a certain point, somebody's going to be looking for information that they can cost out. So, that costing out has to come off of the back end of this schedule, off of May. So, I'm not sure how long that's going to take for somebody to do, but in essence, we've got to have our information complete before you turn it over for costing. And then also as part of that costing, because it's part of the presentation to the town council, is a graphic presentation. And again, I'm not sure who's preparing that and how much time it's going to take for them to prepare that. It can run concurrent with the costing, but nevertheless, it needs to be done. And then also if there's a narrative that needs to go along with that. So I think that the presentation of what we come around with here could take a good part of May, which kind of brings us to 3 months of what we've got. And again, with the things like the community input and then a presentation that we make back to the community. If it's a graphic presentation, I'm not sure how we're going to achieve that. And get the community's input back. So I'd say that within this 4 months that we've got, my sense of working on schedules like this, and we're all volunteer help, this is really a rigorous schedule for what we've got in there. And I'm going to suggest, and you guys can kick us around, I think we got to start meeting weekly here for the next few weeks to make sure that we're up and running, because we've got a lot of things to do. I think that this first community of community input, it just seems to me that it's that's just red hot, needs to happen like first thing in the morning to start organizing that. And we just need, the reason for having the weekly meetings for a little bit here is to make sure that we're all sort of up to speed and getting this thing running. You know, we got to make sure, and after that, I think we can probably relax. But this is just based on my experience of doing projects like this in the past. I think I think we got a really rigorous schedule in front of us with these events we've got to hit. So I guess with that said, and I'd still like to get into this a little bit about who's doing the costing, who's doing the graphic presentations, who's going to be doing the narratives for all of this. I mean, how is that all going to happen? And who's going to do it? And when do we really need to turn it over? I think after we do that, and I'll be happy to sketch this out on our 4-month timeline here of hitting milestone events that we've just got to have done so that the next thing will happen. I mean, we've got some concurrent things that just have to happen. So anyhow, I really think that we need to meet for a week if we're serious about this June 1st deadline. I mean, I was reading that the town council wanted June 1st at the latest. You know, so anyhow, that's sort of my thinking on this. I think we've got our hands full here.
Rocky, can I put you on the spot? I mean, the schedule really has everything to do with keeping pace with your schedule if we can. So I don't think the town council necessarily has a requirement in that regard. It's really to make sure that we're able to give you input that keeps you on the schedule that you're already on.
I'm thinking that, you know, based on what we've talked about tonight, 6 months is probably not a realistic schedule. However, we're going to need some information pretty soon. So I think we need to kind of keep the pressure on. If it isn't 6 months, maybe it's, you know, it slips a little, but I think we're going to need some answers and some direction in that regard. I mean, it's no secret. I mean, Dan and myself and the rest of the Downs team, I mean, we've been drinking from a fire hose for 3 years. And we've got a lot going. There are a lot of moving parts. I think, you know, at this point in time and for the near future, we haven't done anything that really affects what this group is going to be talking about. Everything we've done is we're coming to the center, but we're getting there pretty quickly. So we're probably going to need some answers. You know, if it's not June 1st, it's certainly before the end of the summer. It probably ought to.
Yeah, I might add, Bruce, I like that you're thinking through a lot of the details and the milestones. I think that's important. Maybe that's something you could try to put down for one of the future meetings to kind of go over how we might attack this. I think getting the subgroups or subcommittees meeting or together, some of that's going to start to naturally bubble up. And I think from a council perspective, we're going to be somewhat flexible, but at the same time, we want to keep a little bit of pressure on so that you're thinking through those details and you're actually pushing towards a deliverable. So don't freak out about the June deliverable. I don't think it's a hard date, but we're not ready to move it yet. We want you to get organized and start to kind of work through those details.
I think it makes sense.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So John?
Yeah, I would just add, and maybe Tom, you can provide some clarity on this. In terms of, we also have in there that whatever consulting support this group might need, that's an option as well. So I would say, to John's point, maybe Bruce, as you kind of put together the plan, or as you guys put that together, identify where consulting support might be needed to help, bring in additional resources to help you meet that timeline, especially from like a financial perspective or designing the final layout. That might be something that we could look into as well. So I don't know, Tom, if there's anything you would want to add there.
No, clearly, we anticipated, the council anticipated the need for some outside assistance. To Bruce's point, though, we can't wait till 3/4 of the way through and then say, oh, we need to find a consultant. So we need to start getting some of those things in line.
Yeah.
From the financial forecasting, it remains to be seen how detailed that ends up being, but we do have a professional engineer on staff here that I think can help provide some guidance in that regard. I suspect there's some pretty good talent assembled here that can help in terms of, with the professional input from engineers, putting that data together for presentation purposes. So my hope is that there might be some resources within the committee. If not, we'll bring them to you. So I take that on as a task of mine. I'll start to go through a selection process to identify some consultants that could be in the wings and ready to move when we need them.
Brian?
I'm sitting here staring at our charge, and I'm just really zooming out and kind of pulled by a bungee cord and struck by this line that really talks about, that we're going to be recommending design concepts and amenities that ultimately will inform the master plan that the developer submits. And what that says to me is that it's not up to us to design. It's not up to us to, overly plan. It's really, I don't want to be too cute about it, but it's a little bit of a wish list to make sure that the planning board, when they're doing their final set of approvals, is able to approve based on what the community through us has expressed that they want to see in the downtown. And to me, as I read that takes a little bit of the pressure off in terms of the level of detail of the work that we do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. What I think might make a lot of sense is for one of the agenda items for the next meeting. And I know that Bruce has mentioned maybe adjusting our meeting schedule, which we still have to decide we should talk about. But whether we plan to block off some real time with Rocky and Dan at our next meeting to get a sense of what kind of deliverables are really critical for you guys no later than June 1st. And if we, if beyond that, we determine there's more work for us to do, maybe we can ask to keep working. But I think the first thing that we do need to get a hold on, and thank you, Bruce, for bringing it up, is what do we owe the council and what do we owe Rocky and Dan by late spring? And how do we work backwards from a scheduling perspective to get there? And then I think, we should continue to talk about how we can supplement it. But I think it's important for us to get a clear understanding from you guys what you really need from us most critically, and we should be building our schedule backwards to get there. So I'm just going to mention that that's something I think we should put on our next agenda. But I do think we should still, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, just listening to the committee talk, one way to think about it, where kind of Brian was going, is kind of downtown kind of key elements that you want to see integrated into the master plan, integrated into the downtown, from grandstand to public space to civic buildings. And then in my mind, just as important to those, what are the elements, is what's the way to execute, like an implementation plan. How do you achieve that? Some of that might be the council's decision, but so thinking about it that way might help, where, okay, to do X, there needs to be public-private partnership or the zoning adjustments or whatever they might be to enable private development to do it, or to enable the town to do it, or a combination. So just thinking, hearing you all speak, that might be a simpler way to think about it. Like, what are those things and how are those things achieved versus worrying too much about doing a design of what the downtown looks like.
Right.
Dan, you've either mentioned or alluded to regulation a couple of times tonight, and zoning changes, or when we were talking about parking earlier, and it sort of highlights to me that the more we can talk about concepts, and the more that I think will allow you and Rocky to alert us to opportunities or hurdles to achieving those goals. That might have some lead times to dealing with. Regulatory change doesn't happen overnight, but if we've got a downtown committee here that's saying it's very important to us to do X, Y, and Z, and you're able to identify that we've got a set of rules that almost guarantees that A, B, and C is going to happen instead of X, Y, and Z. It's a very important thing to start dealing with.
I think it might be a helpful exercise, Bruce, if you're willing to put together, maybe without assigning dates, but maybe describe what you see as the milestones as a way to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I'd like to talk with Rocky though as well, if he's okay with that. I need some input from the developer on some of these dates, and then because I think it gets back to who's doing what outside of this group, and making sure that we can factor them in, because our work's done, but then obviously there's other people that need to do stuff. So anyhow, if it's okay if I talk with Rocky or Dan, it's okay with me.
No, I think given I think it'd be very helpful and instructional to all of us. You're thinking like a project manager, and that's not the world I live in necessarily. So identifying what those milestones are, and then us figuring out how we're going to achieve is I think a rich discussion for your next agenda.
Yeah, and I'd like to do it next week.
You won't give up on that, will you?
Oh no, that's project. Well, I got to tell you, my background is time is money, and I've always been driven by time. I understand this is a different group, and if everybody's, it's just the way that I'm driven. If everybody's okay doing it, great. If not, I'll obviously I'll settle down on it. But I normally drive teams.
Let me recommend this. And does anybody feel passionate one way or the other about adjusting our schedule just yet? Let me recommend this. Bruce is going to prepare a presentation for us for 2 weeks from now about benchmarking and about meeting schedules and goals after he's talked to Rocky to determine what he thinks is required of us. And then we'll have a conversation after that presentation about whether we need to start meeting weekly or not. I do, in particular, because we just launched 4 subcommittees, I want to give those subcommittees the next 2 weeks to get some work done. But after you report to us, Bruce, then I think it might be the right time to have the conversation about our weekly or bi-weekly schedule.
Okay.
Sell us, Bruce, on weekly schedules.
If it was up to me, I'm not proposing we do weekly from here on out, but I've been through this, so we're not going to hit June 1st. So if everybody's okay with that, it's just my sense of going through this. We haven't gotten enough traction yet. So and 2 weeks is not enough in between to my way of thinking, but I'm okay with it. I'm not going to fight it.
Okay, so I think we're going to move on to setting our next agenda, which which I think, we probably agree will be 2 weeks from now, in large part because it's a good idea for the subcommittees to get to work. And giving them 2 weeks will hopefully give everybody a chance to report back on what they're up to and how much, and how frequently and how much more they'll need to keep working to complete their responsibilities. So let's talk about what needs to be on that agenda. We already have Bruce, who's going to do some work between now and then to establish benchmarks and a sense of a schedule. What else do we need to talk about at our next agenda?
Travis, would you like an agenda item entitled Subcommittee Report Outs?
Yes, that probably should just become a regular one.
Okay.
As long as they exist, right?
Good. Incidentally, do all of you have contact information for each other, or shall I'll circulate that so you can make your
That'd be
connection?
great.
Okay.
That'd be great, Tom. Thank you.
Yep.
One question I have, and if you can just point me to a document, I'm happy to do my own research, but when we talk about financial modeling, it's not clear to me, like, what are we modeling? What it would cost the town, what it would cost the developer? What is it that we need to model out at some point, or have a consultant model for us?
Yeah, it's not necessarily modeling, Kim. It's really to the extent that this committee identifies specific things, particularly civic items. If we can include in that, as part of that recommendation, kind of probable cost estimates. The charge really clearly doesn't want you to get into the discussion of who pays for it.
Okay.
That's just potentially, that's a complicated discussion. If you wish to offer thoughts on how that might be achieved, that might be okay. But the expectation is that you don't get into the detailed negotiations of who pays for what.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. That was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Brian?
Tom, just to piggyback on that, I mean, one element of a calculation like that could be cost of construction. With this including a CEA, I imagine another element could be lost tax revenue or lost, CEA revenue if we've got a municipal use instead of a commercial use. Is that contemplated as part of the analysis?
I would not recommend you go down that road.
I mean, is that the intent or is that not the intent?
I don't think that's the intent. From my perspective, it was to really preserve this committee and keep you away from that discussion. It's really to identify the items and to the best of your abilities to assign a potential cost to it. And I agree, there's a upfront capital cost and an operational piece. I think the operational piece might be a really helpful part of the analysis.
So keep the politics out and just stick to the facts.
So it's really cost of construction and cost of operation.
And I might say operation to the extent we can. I think helping inform the discussion around operational costs, which are oftentimes more expensive than the upfront capital costs, might be a very helpful piece of information. But we'll have to see which items you identify.
Perfect. That's helpful.
And not to put Sarah on the spot. So for the next item, I think Sarah is going to prepare something from the school point of view to present it.
Right.
Sorry, Sarah, I'm not trying to assign you.
That's fine. I'm happy to. There's a lot of information out there. So what I'll do in advance is I'll try and prepare like any past information. I'll throw it up on that site. And then there's a lot of things it's still in motion. So kind of using Kim's line, I'll try and keep the politics out of it and just share the facts of where we are and talk through the next steps.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah, feel free to create a folder on that drive, just so that information is kind of kept in a nice little spot. Everyone can find it.
Sure.
Great.
So far I have 3 items, but the subcommittee reports could be kind of dense since they've all just formed. We have benchmarking, and Sarah's going to give us a picture of where we are with school needs. Is there anything else that needs to be on this next agenda as far as anyone's concerned? It's probably a good hour and a half.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Carry over,
Great.
Martin from Secco.
Sorry, Tom, I missed that.
We need to carry over Karen Martin from Centro to the next meeting as well.
I think we might hold on Karen for a little bit. That was a recommendation from staff, that maybe we hold on Karen until we're really starting to look for markets that we want to try to attract, and we aren't quite there yet.
I know she's intensely interested in this subject matter, so I may encourage her just to be an attendee so she can start to get a flavor of what the discussion points are, and she'll find her niche, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that we end up shooting questions at her weekly. So that would be great. I know
Right, I'll reach out to her.
Schedule, but that'd be great. Okay, so we have an agenda. I don't see anybody in the attendee list. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee tonight?
No, there's no
Unless you
attendee.
have
Nope.
nothing. Okay. In that case, we are
I was
right.
just gonna
Sorry, go ahead,
suggest
Brian.
that it might be helpful if we do a 2 to 5 minute developer update at the beginning of our meetings. I don't know how, incremental the progress is on site, but just to get a sense of where things are at,
I think that's a great idea.
that could be helpful for us.
Mhm.
This is a standing item.
With your permission, I'll add the 2 standing items would be developers report out maybe at the top of the agenda.
Mhm.
And then we'll have the subcommittee reports as a standing item as well.
Great. Does that cover it, everybody? Everybody feels good with that agenda for 2 weeks from now? Great. In that case, there are no members of the public. I will entertain a motion to adjourn for the night.
Before we adjourn, or after we adjourn, can I chat with the guys who are on the modeling committee? Because I'd like to see what we could do about getting together. I didn't write down the names, and I'd like to just see if we could get a date so we can start to chat here.
That's Brian, Bruce, Tom, and Kim Rand, and then Dan Bacon.
I think we've got Kim Bridgham, right?
Kim Bridgham.
I'm sorry, Kim Bridgham. Yeah.
Kim Bridgham, Brian.
I'll keep the Zoom link open so you can continue to converse.
Okay, that's good. If you guys mind hanging around for a minute?
So I had a motion. I still need a second.
Second.
Brian seconds. All in favor of adjournment?
Hey.
Still in 2 weeks. We're adjourned.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay. So is this? Can everybody hear?
This is it, Bruce.
Almost the group, yeah.
Oh, well, I'm not trying to stir anything up. I thought as long as we were all here, and I'm not prepared to talk about anything myself, but when do we want to sort of get together and pull ourselves together? Is there a time that works for everybody?
Look here for you, Bruce.
Hey.
We're all happy with Zoom. Thursday and Friday afternoon into evenings are fine with me. If that's convenient for anyone else.
I'm good with Thursdays. I'm good with anything, quite frankly.
Yeah, next Thursday works for me.
I might be in the car, but I can take the call in the car, no problem.
Next Tuesday also works, if that works. for
Oh,
others.
yeah, actually, if we did the weeks that we aren't meeting as a committee, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be good for me too.
Okay, let's do that. Next Tuesday.
Does that work for you, Tom?
Yep, it does.
All right.
That's great. And how does this Zoom stuff work? How do we do that? Does somebody host this thing?
Well, one of us can send, I don't know if this works, like I use Teams for work. So I could send a Teams invite. I don't know if that works. It's a Microsoft product. I don't know if that works for everybody.
It's like everyone here has Zoom. I have a corporate Zoom account. If you want me to just
Well,
send
that works too. If you want to send a
Yeah.
Zoom invite, that's
That'd be
great.
Great, Tom.
Tom Hall, if you wouldn't mind just getting me everybody's email here, just to make sure I'm getting the correct emails out. I can set a Zoom link. I'll send that as soon as I have the details from everybody.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll send it out, everyone's contact everyone, so you can call from that the ones you need, okay?
Perfect. Okay.
Very good.
Does it make sense between now and next Tuesday for us to all just like do like Brian, you found that great article. I'm thinking we could just all do a little bit of online research, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And Dan Bacon, obviously, I'm guessing you guys didn't come up with these brilliant plans without looking at other brilliant plans first, right? You probably did, at least a couple minutes of research. So
yeah.
to get us, up to speed with where you guys, have already been, I think could, put us all on the same page and save us a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get some material out by the end of the week.
Great.
Can you just load it to the Google? Maybe we create a folder for our subcommittee and just start throwing articles in there.
Yeah, there's a book that I wanted to share with everybody. It was put together by the Urban Land Group on criteria to use for developing new town centers. And they gave a lot of examples of projects. I mean, and some are large, some are small, but I think that the information was really good. And I was about ready to put it on the Google page that Tom set up, or I'd be happy to drop it in the if we have a subcommittee folder. It's worth looking through. You really don't. It sounds like it should be pretty easy. It's a little bit more to digest in one sitting, but I think that there's some terrific information in there.
I'll go ahead and create a folder for you. What's the working title of this committee? I forget.
It's called the best committee on the committee, Tom.
We are the models.
Yes,
We're the models.
Model citizens of Scarborough.
All right. I will create that before I go home, so you can drop things there. Incidentally, I do have a number of, they're not articles, I could print them off and scan them, I guess, but I've got links that I'll provide to you that I found particularly helpful.
That works.
Yeah, that's good.
I think a small challenge we'll have in this first meeting is that we won't yet have any real input from the community yet. Sort of driving a little bit of our sort of self-education, without really that component that I think is kind of critical. But I think that sort of the more we can digest before this next meeting, or maybe we'll get some input from that committee, sort of better. So I think sort of this approach of a number of topics is probably the best for us between now and next week.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't be yet influenced by if we do a really objective research and then marry it up against what the community wants, I think that's a great second step.
Yeah, this is a delicate matter. It's something that's a tightrope that I walk all the time. The best input I know, the best input comes from when you have an idea to share or a concept to test. Very often it's hard to just get general input. What do you think? It ends up being far more meaningful when you have something tangible that they can react to. Now, of course, the criticism is you've gone too far. You should have brought us in before. But I think this group, you're really tasked with really finding those gems out there. Where are some successful and equally important unsuccessful attempts?
Yeah, because sometimes what people want, it's kind of like I work for Hannaford. So, people say they want to eat healthy, but when they actually go to the supermarket, they don't buy anything healthy. I mean, but people say what they want, and maybe it's not financially viable. So we need to start objective and then marry it up with desires.
Yeah, and the discussion of what we want, it's the rabbit hole that Brian mentioned earlier. It's very specific. Is it practical? Is it financially viable? All of those things come into play. So maybe that sort of granular input is helpful, and you put it in a category, right, in a big bucket as opposed to the specifics. Like I love a brewery there. Hey, just saying.
Yeah.
I think that for Maine, and what I know about Maine, I think that's a perfect solution, or not a solution, but it's a perfect option or a proposal for a space. But I don't think that we need to do that. I think that when we come up with this whole laundry list of stuff that we can throw it out there. I mean, some guys are maybe one or two breweries are going to want to go in. Maybe they're not. I mean, we can't insist that there's one there. But anyhow, I think that we can, conceptually put this together.
I think kind of to Brian's point is in the last meeting too, rather than saying we want a brewery here, we should say like we want sort of, we're hoping to attract a business of this type that, engages the public in this way. So what is a tasting room sort of known for? It's, community gathering. We've got sort of some engagement on both daytime and nighttime, but it's not sort of a nightclub. So it doesn't have the same. So maybe we're hoping to attract something of that type. That's like and then sort of put that in a bucket and then present that in sort of a broader way than just saying we want a restaurant here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what happens sometimes, particularly in this article that I was alluding to, is one of the primary things is density. I mean, getting density into these areas has everything to do to make them financially viable. And to bring people in, one of the things that they talk about is restaurants and or breweries or something along those lines. I mean, so we don't have to be specific about it. We just say, we want, adult entertainment or, good
Be
restaurants.
careful there, Bruce.
Bruce. Not that kind of neighborhood, Bruce.
That throws me back to my youth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Brian, we would need some zoning relief. You asked the question.
Okay, all right. Not that now.
And Dan, I wonder, as part of this effort, could you educate the subcommittee on the requirements or kind of the descriptors in the zoning district? Because I think that does a decent job of kind of engendering an image, so to speak, a conceptual image, kind of this.
Like the purpose of the zone. Is that what you're describing, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think I lifted a bunch of that language in the whereas clauses in the committee charge.
Yeah.
And it really got me
Vibrant
thinking.
downtown and mixed uses and no, I'm excited to work with you folks on some examples. And to me, it's just as much how do you enable, unless the town's going to open a brewery, which maybe the town wants to do that. It's how to, if that's not the goal, how do we enable a brewery to be an early addition if that is a catalyst? Or so a lot of it's elements and enabling versus like this committee proceeding with these things.
Let me just share one thing. This is from the development standards, and I'll leave you with this thought. And I think I'm quoting almost verbatim. The district development standards require human scale streetscape treatments and placemaking that considers common spaces where people can gather, meet, and cross paths, such as community green or common, plaza, court, square, or some variation of each. These places shall be located at the core of a pedestrian realm of development and should be an element of the development streetscape and overall development pattern. So the zone itself really kind of provides the image. It's kind of fleshing it out.
Yeah.
All right, I'll set up that folder and I'll circulate contact information for all of you. Okay.
Great.
So it's 6:30 next Tuesday. Is that where we landed?
And Tom's going to send the invite. Is that right?
Yep, I'll send out a Zoom link so that we'll have unlimited time.
Great.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Dan, one last